Okay, this is take number 2. So, I decided that instead of a regular long-winded rant of sorts, it's been a long time since I made a video. So, after ranting by word for about 10 minutes, I decided to shit can that. So, somebody on my Facebook had a news article about a girl that felt suicidal and wasn't sure she'd make it through the night, and she went to the hospital, which is a brilliant idea, and I applaud her greatly for that, because that's rarely ever the case. And apparently her insurance didn't cover mental health, which I don't know anything about insurances. Mine does. I don't know why it wouldn't, but apparently hers didn't, and she accrued $15,000 or more in bills from trying to save her own life, which is fucked up. So, this got people arguing the whole universal health care thing, which I don't really like talking politics. And, no, just that. I don't really like talking politics. But if you have a decent IQ and actually looked into the entire thing as a whole with an open mind, you would understand how ridiculous universal health care is. But that's not why I'm here. So, the healthcare for mental health in the United States is miserable. It is not helpful a majority of the time. And I thought that I would share some insight on how awful it is. And my stories aren't tragic or bad. I didn't die. And those stories are plentiful, where people died because they could not get any help. That sucks. So I'm not saying that my stories are at all bad, but it just shows how inadequate, from my viewpoint, our mental health care is. So, for example, during the accident 3 years ago, my work tried to get me to use this employee assistance program, which they call EAP, and I never did. And a couple months ago, I was having a bad night, and I was crying, and I was all by myself, and I didn't know what to do, and I had bad thoughts, and I needed help. And so I called the EAP. And I cried to him and told him what was going on, and he gave me a survey to judge how much depression I had, how anxious I was, how bad my thoughts were, whatever. And he said I scored pretty high, because I'm an overachiever, and that somebody would be contacting me within the next 2 days. And I hung up the phone, and I was in shock. Like, I wasn't sad anymore. I mean, they fixed that, so I guess they did do their job. I was pissed. All I needed was somebody to talk to, and I call this number, and they're going to have somebody get back to me in a couple days? What is that? That's the most insane thing I have ever heard of in my life. In my life. Craziness. So, yeah, that's awesome. That's an awesome benefit to have. Don't use an EAP. Well, the EAP did give me 6 free therapy sessions, so I guess in the end it was helpful, but if you really need help, don't call an EAP. Ever. Second situation would be my current one. So the therapist from the EAP told me to go see a psychiatrist because I hadn't seen one in about 4 years. And my primary care physician's been providing my medications for my mental health, and they're not working as they should at all. And I've been on them for a very long time. I haven't seen a professional in a very long time. So I called to get an appointment. And they said, have your doctor give you a referral because then you will get an appointment sooner. So I called my doctor. He gave me a referral. I called back to Central Scheduling to get an appointment with a psychiatrist. And I told her that I needed new meds. Mine weren't working at all. It was important. My therapist says I need to be seen as soon as possible. And she says, well, our next available appointment is April 18th at noon. Do you think you can make that? What? April 18th at noon? No, I can't make that. Are you kidding me? I'm like, I can't wait that long. Well, ma'am, that's the soonest we have. You can get on a waiting list, which I'm assuming this waiting list is like being on a kidney donation waiting list. Like, I think I should put up a billboard that says, please cancel your appointment. I need new medication. April 18th. So I called my doctor back, and he's going to try and finagle something. I hope. Or else I'll just keep trial and erroring through him, which is fine too, because he's an amazing doctor. So that's another fail. And the fact that my psychiatrist that I had before, 4 years ago, I hated. He was awful. My primary care guy didn't like him. I didn't like him. He was not a good doctor at all. So I wanted to see a different psychiatrist. So I called everywhere to see a different psychiatrist. I tell you, I called dozens of places within like an hour and a half radius. And nobody will take you because you are under somebody else's care. Well, what happens if you don't like that somebody? Or you don't trust that somebody? Or whatever. Doesn't matter. I couldn't get into anybody else. So I stopped going. That's awesome. It's just so, everything's so fucked up in that system. When I was at Rogers for my first stint, which is about $1,200 a day without insurance covering it, which I think the first time I was there for 5 days and the second time I was there for 3 or 4, probably 4. And my insurance covered it amazingly. Like, I barely had to pay anything, which was awesome. However, the first time I was in there, I met this guy who was withdrawing off of heroin, and he was a mess. We didn't even see him for like the first 2 days he was there. And, he was a mess, and he was very good looking, so of course, I befriended him. Yep, it's crazy. My mom always said to hang out at a courthouse or a hospital and meet a nice doctor or a lawyer, and I always said I would meet the patient and the criminal, because I would. So I made friends with this guy, and his insurance wasn't going to let him to stay there any longer. And he was telling me about this and how awful it was and da-da-da-da-da. And then the next time I saw him, he had cuts on his arm that were barely visible, but definitely visible. So I said something to someone, and they kept him longer. And he did that on purpose because he knew that I'd see them, he knew that I'd say something, and he knew that they would keep him longer. That's fucked up. Fucked up. And Rogers is great and all, and I have a very close friend that worked for Rogers. And I'm not slamming Rogers, all of Rogers. And it's better than what we have anywhere around here, because there are places that are literally like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, kind of just awful situations. So, and Rogers is really good with eating disorders and kids with OCD. Like, it is really strong in some aspects. But when you're in there for 4 or 5 days for something, you get to see your psychiatrist, and he will diagnose what he thinks you have, which most of the time they just say you're bipolar because it's the easy go-to. And that sucks, because bipolar medication and depression medication and borderline personality disorder medication, all of these medications are different. And it's all trial and error, but it's in different genres. So all these people that think they're bipolar are getting bipolar meds when they're not bipolar. So I was diagnosed as bipolar my first time around. And having gone to college and taken a lot of psychology courses, obviously not enough to be a doctor because I'm sitting in my apartment. Where was I going with that? Oh, I knew I wasn't bipolar. My mood swings aren't that far apart. There was just a lot of things that I was just not bipolar. I had always suspected that I was borderline personality disorder, which I am. And so they put me on the bipolar meds. None of them worked. I said, F this, whatever. Just got on depression meds. Was way better than the bipolar meds. God, those are just awful when you don't even have the disorder. And the second time I was in there, I went to the same psychiatrist, and I said, you know what? I don't think I'm bipolar. And he's just sitting there. He's like, you know what? You could be right, because I don't get to see you very often, and I just call it as it comes in, and that's a good start. That's a good place to start, is apparently by labeling you as bipolar. Which, I really like that psychiatrist. And I do give him the benefit of he doesn't see you for very long at all to figure out what you have. So, he kind of has to just pull something out of his ass. But all these people are being treated for things that they don't have. And when I went to my therapist from the EAP in the last couple months, I told him this story, and he just shook his head, and he said, everyone that I get that comes from Rogers is bipolar. And he's like, not one of them has ever been actually bipolar. That's really sad. For $1,200 a day, you get fed, you see a doctor once, you see a psychiatrist maybe 2 times, you get your medications that you always take, you're in a safe place, all these things. They have little groups, which the groups, I don't think they're helpful. Like I said, everything is just too short. I don't think there's any long-term effects of a 5-day or whatever stint in inpatient. I think you should definitely go to outpatient after inpatient. Get your head straight, be safe, have people to talk to, and then go fix your shit. Because they have not done anything. They'll teach you how to, meditate or mindfully think. And basically all you're doing is just sitting there and coloring. There's a lot of coloring. And none of it's helpful. I can't think of one thing that was very helpful besides having somebody to talk to and not sitting alone in my apartment, because there's always somebody to talk to. That is the one stellar thing about it. So that is my rant. And like I said, none of these things are so minuscule compared to other people's problems with our healthcare system for mental health. It's a tragedy, because there's a reason why people aren't going to ask for help, because where do you go? Who do you go to? How much is it going to cost you? You have to... One of my problems is, yes, do I have bad thoughts? Yes. Would I ever act on them again? Probably not. But I can't even tell my doctor that, because I'll go back to Rogers for 5 days and color a lot. And I don't want to do that. So I just say, I'm fine, which is what everybody does to avoid going somewhere else when we're not fine. And it sucks. There's just nowhere to go. And when you don't have insurance at all, I'm sure that's really, really nowhere to go. But something needs to be done. I don't even know how to even try to endorse fixing the situation, but it really does suck. So if you know anybody that is having bad thoughts or is depressed or whatever, just talk to them. Because most of the time, they just don't want to be alone. Just talk to them. I don't even care if you're listening to them. Just sit there and pretend like you're listening to them. Because that could be super helpful. And free-ish for them. And it can literally save a life. Because there are many nights that, in my past, if I didn't find someone to talk to, I don't know what would have happened, to be honest. So, always try and support somebody, because you never know. You never know what could happen. You could be like, oh, well, Frank's having a bad day today. I'll just talk to him tomorrow about it. Yeah, no, you will really hate yourself in the morning if something bad were to happen. Like, really hate yourself. So, just be supportive of everybody and love everybody. Okay, that's my rant. Oh my God, it's 18 minutes. If you made it to the end of this, I will get you a free loaf of bread. As long as I don't have to ship it anywhere. Okay? Okay, goodbye. Thanks for listening to me.